The question I'm going to focus is on what are the appropriate research questions and methods in a given context. We are all, okay. I just wanted to, I was told that everybody present here will be the managers of the impact evaluation portfolio in your organization. And I'm sure you all face this world where in designing the program, put a lot of attention giving the minute details of what the inputs will be, activities and outputs that will be generated. But then your sponsors or donors come and say, but you have to fill this gap between when you generate what the outputs you are going to generate and the impacts that will result from that. And I'm sure you're very familiar with this role and responsibility that you play, where you need to be explaining what this miracle is that led to those impact. And as impact evaluation managers, you need to ensure that you have a plan in place to bridge this knowledge gap between outputs that will be generated by the programs or interventions for which you are managing the impact evaluation portfolio and the resulting impacts. And you have to do so based on evidence that will be generated using credible methodology. So the focus of this presentation is to discuss the development of appropriate impact evaluation questions. What type of impact evaluation designs are most appropriate in different contexts and given the evaluation questions you are facing. And the purpose of this presentation is just to share some preliminary thoughts on these two questions and present a framework so that it can facilitate further discussion and exchange of ideas and experience that we have in this room today. Again, just to clarify the term impact evaluation, I know this was already given in the beginning, but I just want to sort of lay the groundwork in terms of the direction I'm coming from. When I use the word impact evaluation, it is concerned with establishing a causal link. And this is consistent with what the definition was given before. So we are concerned about establishing that cause between the intervention or the program and then the effect that results from it. And the goal of this analysis at the end is to rule out other possibilities, explanations for those observed effects. So what do we mean by evaluation design? Every evaluation is essentially, it's a research or a discovery activity. And I come from a research background community, being a professor at a university, and I view impact evaluation basically as a research project or something that tries to address a research question. And if your results are reliable, to have your results reliable, you have to give the evaluation a structure in the sense of what are the hypotheses you're trying to test. Just like any research project, you have hypotheses and objectives, and then the method to achieve those, to be able to address those objectives of the research. And this structure, basically the way you're going to, that will lead you to the discovery of an answer is the design, or what I'm calling it as an evaluation design. And this design depends on, first of all, what kinds of questions you want the evaluation to answer. So development of impact evaluation question, that's sort of, to me, sort of the basis on which you build your evaluation design. And the characteristic of appropriate impact evaluation questions, some of them that I could list, and you, with the wealth of experience that is in the room, you could add to this list, is that they should be very narrow and specific. And this perhaps is what Michele tried to say, that you cannot just do an impact evaluation with a very, just a very broad question of trying to measure impact of everything that your project is going to do, but you can narrow it down to a very specific component or an element of the program, and try to raise an evaluation question based on that. Another sort of a good practice guideline or a characteristic of an appropriate IE question would be that you need to focus on few questions that can be addressed through impact evaluation methodology. I know in Patricia's note that's on the website, she says 5 to 7 questions are sort of an appropriate number to focus. Impact evaluation questions are also sort of focused on the questions that are of summative evaluation in nature, sort of at the end of all these interventions, what are the impacts, that type of questions. And they should reflect the input of program participants, the staff members, and also the sponsors. So it will add value, or the results that you will get from those studies, if the questions are sort of developed based on input from others, it will have more utility at the end. So some of the questions that we commonly find in impact evaluation projects or research is, there are several types, but there are some that are related to the question of the overall impact or effectiveness of the program. Basically, did this intervention or the program or policy work? Did it have the effect that was intended, either in the short term, medium term, or long term? The other common questions often asked is for whom and in what ways and under what circumstances did the intervention work or didn't work? What are the unintended impacts, positive or negative, that the intervention generated? And all these questions are, I listed the source there, are part of the Patricia's note that's on the website. The other types of research questions that could be asked as part of the impact evaluation are regarding the nature of the impacts and their distribution. So we would be interested, for example, in questions such as, are impacts likely to be sustainable after the project ends? Did this impact really reach all the intended beneficiaries? The other sets of questions that could be a part of the impact evaluation design are the influence of other factors in generating those impacts. How did the intervention work in conjunction with other interventions to achieve those outcomes? What helped or hindered the intervention to achieve this impact? Now, moving towards sort of the second set of question that I have as part of the objective of this presentation is the impact evaluation designs, especially those focused on this causality or the causal analysis. The methods for examining and this could be divided into two types, the methods that sort of focus on examining the factuals, what has really happened, such as methods such as doing comparative case studies, or asking beneficiaries or the experts about what they attribute the changes they have observed to a particular project. Or they could be methods that are focused on generating or creating a counterfactual and addressing the question of attributing the impact to a specific intervention. And these are, there are a list of methods you can find anywhere in when you open a textbook or any paper on impact evaluations, which range from experimental designs such as RCTs, which are basically based on the principle of random assignment, or there could be other examples like pipeline comparisons, where you are comparing beneficiaries who are getting intervention in the initial phase of the project versus towards the end when the project is rolled out over time. And then there are, gamut of methods and approaches that use statistical techniques to form a credible counterfactual or a comparison group, and this include examples such as methods such as propensity score matching, instrumental variables, regression discontinuity, difference in difference. And as I'm not going in the method because I think that's not the purpose of this workshop to go into the details of the methods, but just to list them as potential methods that could be used or could be available in a toolbox when you're designing an impact evaluation. So in theory, there are multiplicity of methods and approaches that can be used to assess impacts. Each have problems and limitations, again, which I'm not going into that, as I don't think that's the main purpose of this, but just for you all to know that there is no one-size-fits-all method when it comes to designing an impact evaluation. So then the question that we often face is how do you choose which is the most appropriate impact evaluation design? And the answer to this question is that it all depends on many factors. And for example, one of the factors it depends is actually the nature of the research question you are asking. So if the research question is on the or you're more interested in knowing learning the effectiveness of a program, then methods based on observational data and just using some kind of a correlation methods could be appropriate. If the question you're asking is whether the observed effects can reasonably, if your focus is more on the attribution part, then experimental and quasi-experimental methods are more appropriate. If the question is more on answering just a broad question on what has been the net effect, impact of your program, perhaps doing cost-effective or cost-benefit analysis based on, and supplemented that with some qualitative methods to summarize and give a full range of impacts may be more appropriate. Secondly, choosing an appropriate impact evaluation design also depends on the nature of your program. So, depending on how your program is going to be designed, the actual intervention is going to be designed, will dictate the method you could potentially use or not use. Some may be just out of realm of possibilities, just given the nature of your program. Say if you're going to have a program where you're going to roll out your beneficiaries over a period of time, perhaps the pipeline design could be an appropriate method to use. The other question related to your nature of program is actually what is the unit of intervention that your program or project is trying to intervene. Is it at the individual level, is it at a group level, or is it at a community level? And again, depending on this unit of intervention and your sample size, you may not have enough statistical power to base or do your impact evaluation based on certain methodology, and so those may be ruled out from the very beginning, and you may be just left with a subset of methods to explore the research questions. The third is whether your program is assigned to participants or the participants self-select into a program or an intervention. And again, if your program can be assigned, you still have the possibility of randomizing it. But if the participants just are self-selecting into a program and you cannot control in the way you can assign to them, then RCT is out of question and you may be left with some other methods that you need to explore. Again, some another type of, regarding nature of your program, other factors that could influence is, and I think Michele tried to also point this out, that sometimes your intervention or the project you're trying to promote has very obvious effect, and if you go through a very logical step-by-step way, you could rule out other possibilities of something influencing the effect you want to see. And in such cases, just doing before and after comparison without a counterfactual or a control group could also lend you a credible impact evaluation. So it doesn't have to be always with, without, and before and after. Two other factors that could influence the method, what evaluation design you choose are what participants or stakeholders will consent to. Some of the methods really need participation and buy-in of your clients you're serving, or the people who will be part of that you're doing the impact evaluation. And if they don't consent to, you cannot do certain types of impact evaluation. And of course, the most important factor is the resource you have to your disposal, and this is both the time resources, what time is available for you to do such an evaluation, as well as human and financial resources you have at your disposal. So some of the, just to end my presentation, some of the practical considerations that you could keep in mind in designing impact evaluation are, try to establish a program theory, try to understand the logic behind the program and the causal chain of how the inputs are leading to outcomes and impacts, and that should be the sort of the foundation or on the basis on which you should you could design an impact evaluation such that it tries to link all those elements of the log frame or the program theory. Try to understand the program setting, how the participants are selected, is there scope to mitigate the selection bias, or what is the selection bias that is introduced in your selection process. Then also there is, I don't know if you are aware of the OECD publication. One of those publications has this decision tree, very nicely developed, on which method is applicable in which circumstances and should be explored. And so it's kind of a decision tree, a tool that you can use where, depending on what your program setting is and whether some things are possible or no, you can rule out some options, and then it leads you to what is the possible options left for you in a given situation. Sample size. I think coming from an economic background and mostly doing impact evaluations that are quantitative in nature and based on rigorous data collection, sample size is a major issue, at least I face when designing impact evaluation. Sometimes you're not given the unit of intervention that the project is trying to focus, you're not left with many units of intervention to give enough statistical power to your evaluation. And there is always this trade-off between increasing the power from a statistical perspective, which would require more sample size, more units of observations and data collection, and the cost of doing that data collection to achieve that power. Another issue when it comes to practically implementing impact evaluation is the time frame. Do you have enough time to observe the impact? And as Michele said, perhaps you don't have to have 5-6 years of gap between when the intervention happened and the impact to occur. But still, when you are designing an impact evaluation, you do need to beforehand consider whether you will have enough time, whatever it is, 6 months for some projects or 6 years for some other, to really be able to observe the effect and is part of your design in terms of data collection time frame. And lastly, flexibility. I guess you always try to be for the best and most rigorous method you can apply in a given circumstances and for a given research question. But you need to be flexible. Sometimes you start with the best method, but you may end up with the second or the third best method, given all the practical considerations you have to face. I guess thank you very much for listening, and I hope we can have some lively discussions on some of these issues.